Chapter 1. The clock read 7:40 in the morning when Megan Stevens walked through the revolving doors of the mirrored building on Park Avenue. The 23-story building housed the headquarters of Miller Imports, one of the largest foreign trade companies in the country. At 26, Megan carried a worn-out brown briefcase in her hands and a mix of hope and apprehension in her chest that accompanied her every day. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and the grey pantsuit she wore, though well pressed, had the air of having been worn many times. She greeted the security guard with a shy nod and headed for the elevator. Other employees rushed in, some still yawning, others already glued to their cell phones. Megan took her little corner at the back of the elevator as she always did, trying to be invisible. Not that she was unattractive or unpleasant. On the contrary, there was a quiet beauty about her, almost hidden by her withdrawn posture and eyes that rarely met others. She was the kind of person who went unnoticed, not for a lack of qualities, but for her own way of making herself small in the face of the world. The finance department was on the 12th floor. When the doors opened, Megan walked out with hurried steps and followed the white-walled corridor to her workstation. Her desk was in a row of 5 others, all occupied by women who were already there when she arrived 2 years earlier. To her left sat Deborah Shaw, a 32-year-old woman with always impeccably manicured nails and a sharp tongue that spared no one. To her right, Patricia Fisher, who at 29 had already earned 2 promotions and made sure everyone knew it. Megan turned on her computer and arranged the papers on her desk. Her work was meticulous. She checked entries, verified inconsistencies in reports, and organized data with a precision that impressed even the most demanding. When she turned in a project, there were no mistakes. There never were. And yet, in the last 3 performance reviews, her name had not appeared among those promoted. Deborah was the first to arrive that morning. She threw her designer bag onto her desk with a theatrical sigh and looked at Megan with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning, Deborah," Megan said softly without taking her eyes off the screen. "Morning, Meg," her colleague replied, using the nickname Megan had never asked for. "Did you take the subway again? Because I swear I saw a woman who looked just like you at the station, wearing that same outfit." Megan felt her face flush. She didn't answer. She knew that anything she said would be used against her later. Deborah laughed to herself and started fiddling with her phone. In the following minutes, the other colleagues arrived. Patricia, Cynthia, Jessica, and Amanda. They formed a cohesive group, united by gossip and lunches to which Megan was never invited. Not that she cared. She preferred to eat alone with a book in her hand, far from the eyes that always seemed to be judging her. The office began to come to life. Phones rang, printers whirred, conversations crisscrossed. Megan immersed herself in her work, reviewing an extensive spreadsheet of imports from the previous quarter. Her fingers danced over the keyboard with agility, and her concentration was so intense that she didn't notice when Deborah and Patricia began to whisper to each other, casting furtive glances in her direction. She only realized when she heard muffled laughter. She looked up and saw the 2 leaning toward each other, clearly talking about something or someone. Megan swallowed hard and went back to work. The morning dragged on. When noon struck, most of the employees got up to go to lunch. The company cafeteria was on the top floor and had a view of the city. Megan took her packed lunch from the communal fridge and headed there, hoping to find an empty table by the window where she could eat in peace. But on that day, when she entered the cafeteria, she noticed something was different. There were more people than usual, groups, talking loudly, laughter echoing. And several people looked at her as she passed. Megan felt her stomach tighten. She kept walking, trying to ignore it, but the snickers followed her like shadows. She sat at a corner table and opened her lunch container. Rice, beans, shredded chicken. Simple, like everything in her life. She picked up her fork and was about to start eating when Deborah appeared, accompanied by Patricia and Amanda. The 3 sat at the table next to her, but in a way that they were facing Megan. "Hi, Meg," Deborah said with that fake tone of friendliness. "Can I ask you a question?" Megan looked at her, suspicious. "You can. Is it true you've never dated? Because Jessica mentioned you said that once, and we got curious." Megan's fork stopped in midair. She felt the blood rush to her cheeks. I'd rather not talk about it." "Oh, so it's true," said Patricia, letting out a little laugh. "Guys, I can't believe it. 26 and never dated. That's like a record, isn't it?" Several people at nearby tables turned their heads. Megan wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her, but she stayed there, paralyzed, with the fork still in her hand. "It's not just dating, Meg," Deborah continued, leaning forward as if sharing a secret. "We know you've also never, well, you know, never been with anyone, never kissed, never anything." Megan felt her eyes sting. This wasn't new. She knew they had talked about her before, but never like this, so openly, with so many people around. "I don't see what the problem is," she managed to say, her voice trembling. "There's no problem at all, sweetie," said Amanda with a condescending smile. "We just think it's funny." "Like, what? Are you saving it for Prince Charming?" The three of them laughed, and other people in the cafeteria did too. Megan lowered her head, pretending to eat, but the food wouldn't go down. There was a lump in her throat that seemed impossible to undo. "You know what I think," said Patricia, raising her voice so more people could hear. "I think Meg is scared. Scared she won't know what to do, that she won't be good enough, so she prefers to pretend it's by choice." More laughter. Megan closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, tried to focus on anything other than this public humiliation. But the voices continued, relentless. "Or maybe she's waiting for someone special," Deborah suggested. "Like, I don't know, the owner of the company. Can you imagine? The little saint and the richest man in New York." This provoked an explosion of laughter. Megan felt something break inside her. It was as if each laugh was a hammer blow to her dignity. She had put up with a lot. She had swallowed malicious comments, disdainful looks, silent exclusions. But this was beyond the limit. And suddenly, without thinking, without planning, she stood up from her chair. The sound of the chair scraping against the floor made the entire cafeteria fall silent for a moment. All eyes turned to her. Megan looked at Deborah, at Patricia, at Amanda. Her eyes were full of tears, but there was also something new there. Anger. An anger that came from a deep place that had been suppressed for too long. "You want to know the truth?" she said, and her voice, though trembling, echoed through the cafeteria. "You want to know so much about my life? Then I'll tell you. Yes, I'm a virgin. Yes, I've never been with anyone. And you know why? Because I wanted it that way, because I chose it, because I don't need anyone's approval to live my life the way I want to." The silence was absolute now. No one dared to interrupt. "But since it bothers you so much, since you can't stop talking about it, then fine. Someone just take it from me then. There. Are you satisfied now?" The words came out in a desperate shout. Megan was trembling. Tears streamed down her face. She didn't even know what she had just said, only that she had exploded, that she had lost control, that she had exposed her pain in the rawest way possible. The cafeteria remained in a deathly silence. No one was laughing anymore. Some people looked at the floor, embarrassed. Others whispered among themselves. Deborah, Patricia, and Amanda were pale, not knowing what to do or say. Megan picked up her lunch container, threw it in the trash, and walked out of the cafeteria. Her steps were fast, desperate. She wanted to get out of there, to run away, to never come back. She went into the nearest women's restroom, locked herself in a stall, and broke down. She cried like she hadn't cried in years. She sobbed, leaning against the cold wall, feeling the humiliation burn in every fiber of her body. She didn't know how long she had been there, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20. When she finally managed to compose herself minimally, she washed her face, tried to hide her swollen eyes, and went back to her desk. The rest of the afternoon was a blur. She worked on autopilot, without looking to the side, without talking to anyone. But what Megan didn't know was that her outburst in the cafeteria had not gone unnoticed just by the people who were there. There was someone else, someone who rarely went down to the cafeteria, but who on that day, by a whim of fate, had decided to pass by. Raphael Miller was 38 years old and the owner of Miller Imports. He had inherited the company from his father at 25 and had since transformed a regional business into a national empire. He was known for his serious demeanor, his relentless perfectionism, and his total devotion to his work. He had no close friends, he had no long-term relationships. He lived for the company, and the company lived for him. That afternoon, Raphael was leaving a meeting on the 20th floor when he decided to take the stairs to stretch his legs. As he passed the corridor leading to the cafeteria, he heard voices, laughter, and then a scream. A woman's scream, filled with pain and desperation. He stopped. He stood there, near the ajar door of the cafeteria, and heard every word Megan had said. He saw, through the small crack, a young woman with tear-filled eyes, trembling with anger and shame, being publicly humiliated. Something stirred inside him. Something that had been dormant for a long time. It wasn't pity. It wasn't superficial compassion. It was something deeper, a recognition. As if, in that desperate cry, he had seen a truth that few dared to show. Raw vulnerability, courage disguised as desperation. Raphael stood there, watching as the young woman ran out of the cafeteria. He saw the embarrassment on her colleagues' faces. He saw the averted gazes of the other people, and he felt a cold anger rise in his chest. Not against the girl who had screamed, but against those who had pushed her to that point. He continued, down the stairs, thoughtful. He reached his office on the 23rd floor but couldn't concentrate. The image of that young woman wouldn't leave his mind. The desperation in her voice, her broken dignity, and above all, the courage to have stood up, even if explosively. Raphael called his secretary Lucy, a 50-year-old woman who had worked with him forever. Lucy, I need you to find out the name of an employee for me. Lucy raised her eyebrows, surprised. It was rare for Raphael to show interest in specific employees, especially from lower hierarchical levels. Of course, Mr. Miller, how can I identify her? She works in the finance department, brown hair tied back. She was in the cafeteria today around noon. There was an incident. Lucy nodded, understanding. I'll check. It should be easy to find out, considering these things tend to become office talk quickly. Raphael waved her away. He was left alone in his office, looking out at the city through the huge window. New York stretched out before him, grey and chaotic. But he wasn't seeing the city. He was seeing that young woman, and wondering why, of all the things that could have captured his attention that day, it had been precisely that desperate scream. Chapter 2. Megan didn't sleep that night. Lying in her small one-bedroom apartment in Queens, she stared at the ceiling with eyes burning from crying so much. The humiliation in the cafeteria played on a loop in her mind, every laugh, every look, every malicious word. But the worst part was remembering her own shout. Someone just take it from me then. How could she have said that? How had she lost control like that? She thought about not going back. She thought about calling in the morning, faking an illness, quitting. She could look for another job. New York City was big, there were other companies, but a stubborn and tired voice inside her said no. That running away would be giving those women a victory, that she hadn't done anything wrong, that the shame should be theirs, not hers. When the alarm clock went off at 6 in the morning, Megan got up like an automaton. She showered, got dressed, tied up her hair. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a woman with swollen eyes and a tired expression, but she also saw something new, a fragile but present determination. She would go to work. She would face it. She didn't know how, but she would. The subway ride was an ordeal. Every person who looked at her, Megan imagined they knew, that they had seen a video, heard a comment. It was paranoia, of course, but the feeling of being judged was suffocating. When she arrived at the office, everything seemed normal. People coming in, talking, getting coffee. Megan went straight to her desk, turned on her computer, and tried to concentrate. Deborah arrived minutes later. When she passed by Megan, she said nothing. Not, "Good morning," not "hello." She just went to her desk with a neutral expression. Patricia and the others also arrived, and the pattern repeated. Silence, as if Megan had truly become invisible. Part of her was relieved. She preferred silence to scorn, but another part felt a strange pang. It was as if they had completely erased her. The day dragged on. Megan worked with her head down, reviewing reports, checking numbers. At lunchtime, she stayed at her desk. She didn't even consider going to the cafeteria. She ate a cereal bar she had in her purse and continued working. But at 3 in the afternoon, something unexpected happened. Lucy, the company owner's secretary, appeared in the finance department. She was a known and respected figure. When she entered a department, it was because something important was happening. "Megan Stevens?" Lucy asked, looking around. Megan raised her head, surprised. "That's me. Mr. Miller would like to speak with you. Now, if possible." Megan's world stopped. Raphael Miller, the owner of the company, the man she had only seen twice in 2 years, always from a distance, always surrounded by executives. Why would he want to talk to her? Deborah and Patricia exchanged glances. Whispers started immediately. Megan stood up, her legs wobbly. She followed Lucy to the elevator, trying to control her breathing. Her heart was beating so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. "Do you know why he wants to see me?" Megan asked, her voice weak. Lucy gave an enigmatic smile. "He'll explain." The elevator went up. 12th, 13th, 14th. Each floor seemed like an eternity. Megan tried to organize her thoughts. Was it about the incident in the cafeteria? Was she going to be fired? Had someone formally complained about her? 23rd floor. The doors opened to a completely different environment. Marble floors, wood-paneled walls, soft lighting. Lucy guided her down a silent corridor to a double mahogany door. She knocked lightly and opened it. "Mr. Miller, Miss Stevens is here." Megan entered. The office was immense. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed New York City stretching as far as the eye could see. A gigantic glass desk dominated the center of the room, and behind it was Raphael Miller. He was taller than Megan had imagined. He had black hair with a few gray strands at the temples, dark, penetrating eyes, and a posture that conveyed absolute authority. He wore an impeccable dark gray suit. When he looked at Megan, she felt as if he was seeing right through her. "Ms. Stevens," he said, in a deep, controlled voice. "Please have a seat." Megan obeyed, sitting in one of the leather armchairs in front of the desk. Her hands were shaking, so she hid them in her lap. "Thank you, Lucy," Raphael said, and the secretary left, closing the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Raphael continued to look at Megan as if studying her. She didn't know where to look. She looked at the desk, at the windows, anywhere but at that intimidating man. "You've been working in the finance department for 2 years, correct?" he finally asked. "Yes, sir." "And your job is to review entries and import reports?" "That's right, sir," he nodded. "I've looked at some of the reports you've prepared in recent months. They're impeccable, precise, detailed. You have a talent for numbers." Megan blinked, surprised. "Thank you, sir. But despite that, you've never been promoted. Why?" The question caught Megan by surprise. She didn't know how to answer. I don't know, sir." "Do you think it's for a lack of competence?" "No, sir, I do my job well. I know I do." "Then why do you think you're always left out of promotions?" Megan swallowed hard. She had 1,000 possible answers, but none she could say out loud. Because she didn't sell herself. Because she wasn't part of the cliques. Because she was shy. Because she didn't have the right connections. "I don't know, sir," she repeated. Raphael leaned back in his chair. "I do. It's because you don't assert yourself. You let people walk all over you, and when you finally react, it's in a way that, well, that ends up being counterproductive." Megan felt her face heat up. He knew about the cafeteria, about the scream, about everything. The humiliation returned like a wave. I'm sorry, sir. I lost control. It won't happen again." "You've misunderstood," Raphael said, leaning forward. "I'm not reprimanding you, I'm observing you. There's a difference." Megan looked up, confused. "Observing?" "Yes. You were publicly humiliated, and instead of taking it silently, you reacted. It was a desperate reaction, perhaps not the smartest one, but it was a reaction. Many people in this company swallow injustices. Every day and never say a word. You did. It wasn't something to be proud of, Megan murmured. Raphael was silent for a moment. Then he stood up and walked to the window. With his back to her, he said, "I lost someone many years ago, someone who meant a great deal to me. She was like you, kind, dedicated, talented, but she never asserted herself. She let others diminish her, and when she finally wanted to react, when she finally wanted to show her worth, it was too late." Megan didn't know what to say. This conversation was heading into territory she didn't understand. Raphael turned to face her. "That's why I called you here. I want to offer you something, a chance. You will work directly for me. You will be my assistant on special projects. You will learn the inner workings of the company in a way few have the opportunity to." Megan was paralyzed. Assistant? His assistant? It made no sense. Sir, I don't understand. Why? Why me?" "Because I saw something in you that most people don't. I saw courage where others see weakness, and because I believe you deserve a chance you were never given." But that will cause problems. People will talk. They'll think that you what?" he interrupted, with a firmness that silenced her. "That you don't deserve it? That you were favored? Let them talk. What matters is whether you're willing to accept." Megan looked at him, this powerful, distant man who seemed to have everything, and he was offering her an opportunity that could change her life. But there was something in his eyes, something she couldn't decipher. It wasn't just professional interest, there was something else. "I accept," she said, before fear could make her back down. "I accept, Mr. Miller." Raphael nodded. "Good. You start on Monday. Lucy will give you all the details. You may go now." Megan stood up, still dazed. As she reached the door, he called her back. "Miss Stevens." She turned. "Yes, sir?" "One thing. Here, when we're alone, you can call me Raphael." Megan nodded, speechless, and left. The corridor seemed to spin around her. When she got into the elevator, she leaned against the wall, trying to process what had just happened. But when she returned to the 12th floor, reality hit her. All heads turned as she passed. The looks were filled with curiosity, envy, speculation. Deborah was the first to approach with a fake smile. "Wow, Meg, you were called up by the owner of the company. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Megan replied, trying to sound neutral. "What did he want to talk about?" "Work matters." Deborah narrowed her eyes. "What kind of matters?" Megan sat at her desk and turned on her computer. "I'd rather not comment." The answer did not please her. Deborah went back to her seat but didn't stop casting glances in Megan's direction, and soon the whispers began. Whispers that Megan pretended not to hear. She knew what they were thinking. She knew what they were saying, but it didn't matter. For the first time in 2 years, she had something they didn't, a chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. Chapter 3. The weekend was an emotional roller coaster for Megan. Between the anxiety of her new position and the insecurity about what it all really meant, she could barely relax. She spent Saturday compulsively cleaning her apartment, trying to calm her mind. On Sunday, she went to Mass at the local church in Queens, as she did every Sunday since moving to New York. She prayed for wisdom, courage, and discernment. She wasn't sure what she was asking for, but she needed something beyond herself to face what was coming. Monday arrived with a grey sky and a fine drizzle typical of New York. Megan carefully chose what to wear. Nothing too flashy, but also nothing that would make her look sloppy. She opted for black dress pants and a simple white blouse. She pulled her hair into a ponytail and put on a little mascara. She looked at herself in the mirror. She looked professional, competent, even if on the inside she was trembling. When she arrived at the office, she went straight to the 23rd floor, as Lucy had instructed by email. The secretary greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, Megan. Welcome. I'll show you to your new workstation." Lucy led her down a side corridor to a smaller room, but still much more spacious and well-decorated than anything Megan had ever had. There was a light wood desk, a new computer, a comfortable ergonomic chair, and a window with a view of the city. "This is your office. Mr. Miller requested that you have your own space to concentrate. He will brief you on the first projects in a few minutes." Megan looked around, still in disbelief. "Thank you, Lucy. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything. You just need to do your best. And between us," she added, lowering her voice, "Mr. Miller doesn't do this sort of thing for no reason. If he chose you, it's because he saw real potential." Before Megan could reply, Raphael appeared at the door. "Good morning." They both turned. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," Megan said, feeling her heart race. "Lucy, could you leave us?" he asked. Lucy nodded and left, closing the door. Raphael entered the room and looked around, assessing it. "Are you comfortable here?" "Yes, sir. Very. Thank you." "Good. Then let's get straight to it." He pulled up a chair and sat down, which surprised Megan. It was strange to see him so close without the barrier of the gigantic desk. "I'm restructuring some processes in the company. I want to review old contracts, identify operational bottlenecks, and optimize costs. For that, I need someone who understands numbers, who is meticulous, and who has a critical eye. You meet those requirements." Megan nodded, trying to absorb everything. "I understand. Where do I start?" Raphael took a folder from inside his blazer and placed it on the desk. "Here are the contracts from the last 5 years with our main suppliers. I want you to analyze each one, identify clauses that can be renegotiated, and point out any inconsistencies. You have 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Megan looked at the folder. It looked thick, full of documents. But she had dealt with things like this before. She could do it. "I'll start right away." Raphael looked at her for a moment. There was something in his gaze that made Megan uncomfortable, but not in a bad way. It was as if he was trying to understand her, to decipher her. "Can I ask you a question?" he said suddenly. Megan hesitated. "Of course." "Why did you never ask for a promotion? Why did you never go after what you deserved?" The question caught her off guard. She thought before answering. "I guess I always thought my work would speak for itself, that if I did a good job, I would be recognized naturally. And you weren't." "I wasn't," Megan admitted, a lump in her throat. "Do you know why? Because the world doesn't work that way. Talent without a voice is wasted talent. You need to learn to assert yourself, to show your worth, and that's what I'm going to teach you while we work together." Megan looked at him, feeling something strange, gratitude perhaps, or hope. "Thank you, Raphael, really." He stood up. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you get results. And, Megan, if you need anything, any questions, my door is always open." When he left, Megan was alone with the folder of contracts. She opened the first page and dove into the work. The hours passed without her noticing. Numbers, clauses, technical terms. It was the kind of work she loved, meticulous, precise, demanding full attention. Lucy appeared at noon with a lunch container. "Mr. Miller asked me to bring you lunch. He said you'd probably forget to eat." Megan looked at the clock, surprised. It was already noon. "Oh, thank you so much. I really had forgotten." Lucy smiled. "He has good instincts about people. Eat slowly and rest a bit. The work isn't going anywhere." When she was alone again, Megan opened the container. Grilled salmon, brown rice, steamed vegetables. It was a much better meal than anything she usually ate. She ate slowly, looking out the window. The city bustled below, millions of people living their lives, each with their own problems and dreams. And there she was, 26 years old, in an office on the 23rd floor, with a chance she never imagined she'd have. But as she savored that moment, a shadow loomed over her thoughts. Down on the 12th floor, she knew that Deborah, Patricia, and the others were talking about her, creating theories, spreading venom. And that idea bothered her more than she wanted to admit, and she was right. At that very moment in the finance department, the atmosphere was one of pure speculation. Deborah fiddled distractedly with her phone, but her eyes frequently darted toward Megan's empty desk. Patricia, sitting next to her, couldn't contain herself. "This is absurd, completely absurd. How did Megan become the owner's assistant overnight?" "Obviously, there's something going on," Deborah said with a malicious smile. "She hit on him. I bet she went crying on his shoulder, playing the victim." Amanda, who was listening, joined the conversation. "Did you see how he looked at her when he came to get her on Friday? There was something strange there. Nobody looks at an employee like that. Maybe she's not as saintly as she pretends, suggested Cynthia from another desk. Maybe all that virgin talk is just a strategy, playing hard to get to attract attention. The four of them laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, full of poorly disguised envy. And as they speculated, a fifth person listened to everything in silence. Jessica Preston was 34 and the most senior in the department. Unlike the others, she had never actively participated in the bullying against Megan, not because she was particularly sympathetic to her colleague, but because she had too many of her own problems to worry about others. But now, hearing this, Jessica felt something different. Anger. Not at Megan, but at Raphael Miller, because 3 years ago she had had a brief involvement with him. It was at a company holiday party, drinks, music, and a moment of weakness on both their parts. They spent one night together, just one. The next day he acted as if nothing had happened. Professional, distant, cold. Jessica tried to get close again, but was subtly rejected. Eventually she gave up. But the hurt remained. And now he was giving special attention to Megan, the shy little girl who had never been with anyone. That was an insult, a personal humiliation. Jessica began to formulate a plan. If Raphael wanted to play that game, she would show him who really deserved his attention. And, while she was at it, she would put that Megan in her place. Meanwhile, on the 23rd floor, Megan continued to work, oblivious to the storms brewing around her. At 6 in the evening, when she finally looked up from the documents, she realized she was alone on the floor. Everyone had already gone home. She organized her papers, grabbed her bag, and headed for the elevator. But as she passed Raphael's office, she saw that the door was ajar and the light was on. She hesitated. Should she say goodbye? Would that be weird? Before she could decide, his voice came from inside. Megan, leaving already? She pushed the door open slowly. Yes, it's late. I thought... Come in, he interrupted. She entered. Raphael was standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked tired, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. How was your first day? He asked. Productive. I've already reviewed half the contracts. I think I'll finish ahead of schedule. He nodded, but he didn't seem truly focused on her answer. Megan, can I ask you something personal? Megan's heart skipped a beat. You can. Why did you never... He hesitated, as if searching for the right words. Why did you preserve yourself so much, in a way that made you a target for so much ridicule? The question was too intimate, invasive, but there was something in the way he asked, a genuine curiosity that made Megan answer honestly. Because I wanted to find something real. I didn't want to just go with the flow, do what everyone else does because it's expected. I wanted it to mean something. Does that sound silly? Raphael was silent for a long moment. Then he murmured, No, it doesn't sound silly. It sounds rare. And brave. Megan felt her face heat up. I should go. It's late and... Wait, he said, taking a step toward her. I know this might sound strange, but I'd like to have dinner with... Are you? Not as boss and employee. As two people who might need some company. Megan's world stopped. Was this real? Was this happening? Raphael, I don't know if that's appropriate. It's not, he admitted. But I don't care. Do you? Megan looked at him. At this powerful, rich man who could have any woman he wanted, and he was here, asking for her company. It was crazy. It was risky. But it was also the most exciting thing that had ever happened in her life. Okay, she said softly. I accept. Chapter 4. The restaurant was in an upscale neighborhood, far from downtown and prying eyes. Raphael had chosen a discreet, elegant place with soft lighting and instrumental music in the background. When they entered, the maitre d' greeted them by name, confirming that Raphael was a frequent customer. They were led to a corner table, isolated from the others where they could talk privately. Megan felt out of place. Her simple cotton dress seemed inadequate next to the sophistication of the environment. But Raphael didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't care. "Do you come here often?" Megan asked, trying to make conversation as she looked through the menu. The prices startled her. One dish cost more than she spent on food in an entire week. "From time to time. When I need to think. The food is good, and no one bothers me. It must be nice to have a place like this." Raphael gave a slight smile. Sometimes solitude is comfortable, but sometimes it's just empty. Megan looked at him, trying to decipher what that meant. Before she could ask, the waiter appeared to take their orders. Raphael ordered for both of them, choosing dishes he knew she would appreciate. The familiarity with which he did it was strange, but also comforting. When they were alone again, Raphael leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about yourself. About your life before the company. About what brought you to New York." Megan wasn't used to talking about herself, but something about that night, in that intimate setting, made the words flow. She told him about her childhood in upstate New York, in a small town where everyone knew each other, about her parents, who owned a small market and worked from sunup to sundown to give their children an education, about how she was always good at math, how she got a scholarship to study business in Buffalo, and how she later moved to New York in search of better opportunities. "And were your expectations met?" Raphael asked. Megan gave a humorless laugh. "Not exactly. I thought it would be easier. That competence would be enough. But I realized the world is more complicated than I thought." "It is," Raphael agreed, "and often unfair." The food arrived. It was delicious. Megan ate slowly, savoring each bite, but also paying attention to the conversation. Raphael also talked a little about himself, about how he inherited the company too young without being prepared, about how he had to learn everything on his own, making mistakes and successes along the way, about how work became his only constant in a life full of uncertainties. "Did you never want to build something besides work?" Megan asked. "A family, perhaps?" Raphael's face clouded over for a moment. "There was a time when I did, but things didn't turn out as I planned." Megan realized she had touched a sensitive subject. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked." "No, it's okay." He took a sip of wine. "I had someone. A long time ago. I was young, in love, thought we had our whole future ahead of us. But she was gone. And after that, I just stopped trying." "Gone?" Megan echoed, confused. Raphael was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, lower, heavy with an old sadness. "She passed away in an accident. We had been together for 2 years. I was 28. She was 26. The same age you are now." Megan felt a tightness in her chest. "I'm so sorry, Raphael." He nodded. "It was a long time ago. But some scars don't fade. After her, I had a few relationships, but nothing that really mattered. Nothing that made sense. I ended up convincing myself it was easier this way. Alone, focused on work." "And now?" He looked at her, and there was something different in his gaze, something intense. "Now I'm starting to question those choices." The air between them grew heavy. Megan felt her heart pounding. She didn't know what to say, how to react. This was happening too fast. It was all too intense. Raphael noticed her discomfort. "I'm sorry I'm being too heavy. Let's change the subject." The rest of the dinner was lighter. They talked about books, movies, music. They discovered they had surprisingly similar tastes. They laughed at the same jokes. And Megan began to relax, feeling more and more comfortable. When they left the restaurant, it was already past 10 o'clock. Raphael insisted on driving her home. In the car, an immaculate black BMW, the silence was comfortable. Megan looked out the window, watching New York pass by in lights and shadows. "Thank you for tonight," she said when he stopped in front of her building. "It was special." "For me too," Raphael said. "Megan, I know this all might seem strange. I'm your boss, you're my employee, there's an age difference, a difference in position, but I'd like to keep seeing you, outside of work, if you'd like, of course." Megan looked at him. There was sincerity in those eyes, and vulnerability. I'd like that too. He smiled. It was the first time she had seen him truly smile, and it completely changed his face. It made him look younger, more approachable. Then I'll see you tomorrow. Get some rest. Megan got out of the car and went up to her apartment, floating. That night had been like a dream, but when she lay down in bed, reality began to seep in. What was she doing? Getting involved with her boss? This could go very wrong. It could end her career, her reputation. What if he was just playing? What if this was all just a passing curiosity? But on the other hand, there was something genuine about him, something that resonated with her in a way she had never felt before. And maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. While Megan wrestled with her thoughts on the other side of the city, in a luxurious penthouse, Raphael was also awake. Sitting on the terrace overlooking the city, he held a glass of whiskey and thought about Megan, about that simple young woman who had somehow broken through all his defenses. He knew he was treading on dangerous ground, that mixing feelings with work was a recipe for disaster. But there was something about her that drew him in, an authenticity he rarely encountered, and after so many years of living on autopilot, that feeling of being alive again was addictive. But Raphael was not naive. He knew this situation would create problems, that people would talk, that there would be consequences, and there was something that bothered him deeply. Jessica Preston. He vaguely remembered that night, years ago. It had been a mistake, a moment of weakness he preferred to forget. But he knew that women like Jessica didn't forget easily, and if she found out about Megan, things could get complicated, and his suspicions were correct. At that very moment, Jessica was in her apartment, browsing social media, looking for any information about Megan. She didn't find much. The girl had practically no online presence, an outdated Facebook profile, no Instagram, nothing interesting. But that only made her more determined. The next day, Jessica arrived at the office with a plan. She would be subtle, strategic. She would start by planting doubts, spreading calculated rumors. She would make it seem like Megan was using Raphael to climb the corporate ladder, that she was an opportunist, disguised as an innocent. During breakfast in the cafeteria, she sat with Deborah, Patricia, and Amanda. "Girls, we need to talk about the Megan situation." The three leaned forward, eager for gossip. Jessica had that effect. She was older, more experienced, and when she spoke, the others listened. "I've known Raphael Miller longer than any of you," Jessica began, "and I can assure you he doesn't do anything without a reason. If he's giving special attention to Megan, it's not out of pity or because of her competence." "You think they're—" Amanda couldn't finish the sentence. "I don't know, but it's suspicious, very suspicious. And you know what happens when this kind of thing comes to light, right? Scandals, firings, harassment lawsuits." "But what if she was the one who hit on him?" suggested Deborah. "Exactly," Jessica agreed with a malicious smile. "And someone needs to protect the company from that. Someone needs to make Raphael realize he's being manipulated." "And how do we do that?" Patricia asked. "You leave it to me. I'm going to have a talk with him, a private one, and I'm going to open his eyes to who that girl really is." The four continued to plan, unaware they were being watched. From the other side of the cafeteria, hidden behind a pillar, an intern named Camilla had heard everything. And Camilla had her own reasons for wanting to protect Megan. After all, she had also been a target of bullying when she first started working there. And Megan, unlike the others, had always been kind to her. Camilla knew she had to warn Megan. But how could she do it without seeming nosy? She decided to wait for the right moment. Meanwhile, on the 23rd floor, Megan was working, focused on the contracts. Raphael passed by her office a few times, always with some professional excuse, but his glances said something else, and Megan felt butterflies in her stomach every time it happened. Around 3 in the afternoon, Lucy appeared at the door. "Megan, Mr. Miller has asked you to come to his office." Megan stood up, smoothing her skirt. When she entered the office, Raphael was on the phone. He gestured for her to sit and wait. She watched him as he talked, noticing details. The way he gestured, the firmness in his voice, the concentration on his face. When he hung up, he turned to her. "Sorry, a crisis with a supplier." "Is everything resolved?" "For now." He sat in the chair in front of her, not behind the desk. I wanted to ask you, do you have plans for Saturday? Megan blinked. No, why? I thought I'd take you to see a place, outside the city. I have a house in the Catskills that I rarely visit. I thought it might be a good place to talk, without interruptions. Megan felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Would it be just a conversation? Or did Raphael expect more? And what did she expect? I'd love that, she finally said. Raphael smiled. Great. I'll pick you up at 9. When Megan left the office, she was so lost in her thoughts that she almost bumped into someone in the hallway. It was Jessica. The two looked at each other, and Megan saw something in her colleague's eyes that made her blood run cold. Anger. Pure and simple. Chapter 6. On Sunday night, when Raphael dropped Megan off at home, they both knew the real world was waiting for them. The bubble they had created in the Catskills was going to burst as soon as they stepped into the office on Monday, but the weekend had been so perfect that neither of them wanted to spoil it by talking about it. Thank you for everything, Megan said at the door of her building. It was the best weekend of my life. For me too, Raphael replied. And Megan, about Monday. We're going to have to be careful, not for my sake, but for yours. I don't want your reputation to be damaged. I know. We'll keep it professional at the office. He nodded, but he took her hand before she got out of the car. Only at the office. Outside of it, I want to keep seeing you. I want that too. They said goodbye with a quick kiss, and Megan went up to her apartment with a light heart. But when she lay down in bed and picked up her phone to set the alarm, she saw she had several unread messages. They were from unknown numbers. Curious and a little apprehensive, she opened them. What she saw made her freeze. They were anonymous messages, all with the same tone. Be careful what you're doing. He'll use you and discard you. You're not special. You're just another one. Megan felt a knot in her stomach. Who was sending these? How did they get her number? She blocked the contacts and tried to sleep, but the night was restless, filled with nightmares. On Monday morning, she arrived at the office determined to ignore everything and focus on her work. But when she entered the 23rd floor, she noticed something was different. Lucy greeted her with a worried expression. Megan, I need to warn you about something. Mr. Miller had an emergency meeting with HR this morning. Jessica Preston filed a formal complaint alleging irregular favoritism. Megan's world spun. What? She claimed that you're receiving special treatment and opportunities that should be distributed more equitably, and that this creates a hostile work environment for other female employees. But that's absurd. I'm working hard, doing excellent work. I know, dear. And Mr. Miller knows too. But he has to follow protocol. He has to investigate. It's standard procedure. Megan felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to cry. Where is he? In his office, but I think you should wait. He's not in a good mood. Megan didn't wait. She went straight to Raphael's office and walked in without knocking. He was on the phone, but when he saw her, he hung up immediately. Megan, you heard. It wasn't a question. I heard. And is this because of us? Because of the weekend? Raphael stood up and walked over to her. No, this is because of an envious woman who is trying to destroy something she doesn't even understand. But I'll handle it. How? How will you handle it without confirming exactly what she's implying? He fell silent, because they both knew she was right. Any defense he made of Megan now would seem suspicious. It would look like confirmation. Maybe I should just quit, Megan said, her voice trembling. Before this becomes a bigger scandal. No, absolutely not. You are not giving up your job, your career because of gossip. I won't allow it. You can't protect me from everything, Raphael. I can try, and I will. He took her hands. Do you trust me? Megan looked at him. In his eyes there was determination, anger, and also fear. I do. Then let me handle this my way. When Megan left the office, she was shaking. She went back to her office and tried to work, but it was impossible to concentrate. The words from the anonymous messages echoed in her head. He'll use you and discard you. You're not special. Meanwhile, Raphael called an extraordinary meeting with the HR department and Jessica. The meeting took place in a conference room on the 20th floor. Jessica arrived with an expression of false concern, accompanied by an HR representative. "Mr. Miller, I truly regret having to do this," Jessica began. "But as a senior employee, I feel it's my responsibility to ensure a healthy work environment." Raphael sat at the head of the table, his expression impassive. "I understand. Can you detail your concerns?" Jessica opened a folder. "It's documented here. Ms. Megan Stevens was hired 2 years ago as a junior analyst. She never received any promotion or special recognition. Suddenly, 2 weeks ago, she is promoted to special assistant to the CEO, gets a private office, and has access to confidential projects, all without going through any internal selection process." "And what is the problem?" Raphael asked calmly. "The problem is that this sets a dangerous precedent. Other equally qualified female employees did not have the same opportunity, and there are rumors." She hesitated, feigning discomfort. "There are rumors that this promotion was not based on professional merit." "Rumors," Raphael repeated. "You're basing a formal complaint on rumors." "It's not just rumors. There are witnesses who claim to have seen you two in compromising situations." Raphael leaned forward. "What kind of situations?" Jessica swallowed hard, realizing she was treading on dangerous ground. "Dinners, trips, long private conversations. I have dinner with various employees to discuss projects. I travel with team members when necessary. And I have private conversations with dozens of people every day. That's part of my job. Do you have any evidence of anything inappropriate, or are you just making baseless accusations?" The HR representative intervened. "Mr. Miller, I understand your position, but the issue here is not just about proven impropriety, it's about perception. If other employees believe there is favoritism, it affects morale and productivity." Raphael leaned back in his chair. "I see, then let's do this. I will open up Ms. Stevens' promotion process to an external review. I will bring in independent consultants to evaluate her work and determine if the promotion was justified. If it was not, I will reverse the decision myself. Is that acceptable?" Jessica blinked, not expecting that. Yes, I think that would be appropriate." "Excellent. Then I consider the matter closed until the review is completed." The meeting was over. Jessica left the room frustrated. That hadn't gone as planned. She had expected Raphael to get defensive, to show signs of guilt. But he had been cold, calculating, and had turned the tables. Now she would have to wait for the results of this so-called review. And if Megan was really good at what she did, Jessica would have only exposed herself as envious. But she wasn't going to give up that easily. She had another card up her sleeve, the secret that Raphael didn't know she knew. And it was time to use it. That afternoon, Jessica waited until most of the employees had gone home. Then she went up to the 23rd floor. Lucy had already left, and the waiting area was empty. She knocked on Raphael's door. "Come in," he said without looking up. When he saw who it was, his expression hardened. "Jessica, what do you want?" She closed the door behind her and approached the desk. "I want to remind you of something. Of a night 3 years ago. A holiday party. You and me." Raphael tensed. That was a mistake. On both our parts. And it has nothing to do with the current situation. It has everything to do with it because it shows a pattern. You getting involved with female employees, and now it's happening again with this Megan. The difference is that this time you're falling in love, and that makes you vulnerable. "Get out of my office," Raphael said, his voice dangerously low. "You know I could make that night public. I could say you took advantage of your position, that it was harassment. You were as sober as I was, and you were the one who initiated it. But go ahead, make your accusations. I have the emails you sent me afterward, making it clear it was consensual and that you wanted more." "Do I? You really want to go down that road?" Jessica turned pale. She hadn't thought of that. "You kept the emails?" "I keep everything. It's how I do business. And now, if you have nothing else constructive to say, leave." Jessica left, But she was far from defeated. She might not have that trump card, but she had others, and she was willing to use them all. Meanwhile, Megan was in her office looking out the window. Camilla appeared at the door, hesitant. "Megan, can I come in?" "Of course, Camilla." The intern came in and closed the door. "I heard about Jessica's complaint. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. I know, but there's something you need to know. Jessica isn't doing this just out of professional envy. She had a thing with Raphael years ago, and I think she never got over it." Megan felt as if she had been punched in the gut. "A thing? How do you know?" "I heard her telling the others. She was drunk at an office party last year and let it slip. It was brief, but it happened." Megan fell silent, processing it. Raphael had mentioned he'd had relationships that meant nothing. Was Jessica one of them? It made sense. It explained her disproportionate anger. "Thank you for telling me," Megan finally said. When she was alone again, Megan didn't know what to feel. She couldn't blame Raphael for having a past. Everyone did. But the idea that he had been with Jessica, the woman who was now trying to destroy her, was disturbing. She needed to talk to him. She needed to hear the truth from him. But when she looked at the clock, she saw it was already past 8. Raphael had probably already gone home. She decided to leave too. She gathered her things and was heading out when she saw a light still on in his office. She hesitated. Should she go in, or should she wait until tomorrow? Before she could decide, the door opened and Raphael appeared. When he saw her, he stopped. "Megan, I thought you had already left." "I was just leaving. I saw your light on." They stood there, in the empty hallway, looking at each other. There were so many unspoken things between them. "Do you want to talk?" Raphael asked. Megan nodded. "I do." Chapter 8. In the days following the meeting, the atmosphere in the office changed drastically. Raphael wasn't bluffing when he talked about disciplinary measures. Jessica was called into HR and received a formal warning for inappropriate conduct. Deborah and Patricia were also reprimanded for participating in the smear campaign, and an internal memo made it clear that any form of workplace harassment would be met with zero tolerance. Megan had expected to feel satisfaction in her victory, but what she felt was mostly exhaustion. Exhaustion from constantly having to prove her worth. Exhaustion from being judged. But there was also something new. Respect. People who used to ignore her now greeted her in the hallways. Colleagues asked for her opinion in meetings. Her name was mentioned with seriousness when they discussed important projects. Lucas Morgan became a friend. He and Megan started having lunch together sometimes, talking about work and life. Lucas had a girlfriend, so there was no romantic tension, just a genuine friendship that Megan appreciated. One day during lunch, Lucas asked, "So, you and the big boss, is it serious?" Megan almost choked on her water. "How do you know?" "Megan, everyone knows, or at least suspects. But after that meeting, I think people are more willing to believe that you two really connected, not out of self-interest. It is serious, very serious, at least for me." "And for him," Megan thought before answering. "I think so. He says so. But sometimes I'm afraid it's just, I don't know, a passing infatuation. He's so experienced, he's lived so much, and I'm special," Lucas completed. "You're special, Megan, and he'd be a fool not to see it." Meanwhile, on the 23rd floor, Raphael had his own dilemmas. He knew his relationship with Megan was deepening. It was no longer just attraction. It was something more complex, more frightening. He was truly falling in love, and that brought all his insecurities to the surface. He talked to Lucy about it. The secretary was the closest thing he had to a confidant. "You're afraid of hurting her like you hurt Caroline," Lucy said directly. She had a habit of not beating around the bush. "I am. With Caroline I was selfish. I only thought about work, and she paid the price. But you were young, and you're doing things differently now. I see how you look at Megan, how you care. That's good, Raphael. And what if it's not enough? What if I end up hurting her too? So you're saying you'd rather never try? You'd rather be alone forever for fear of doing something wrong? That's not living. That's just existing." Lucy's words stayed with Raphael. She was right. He couldn't let the fear of the past destroy a chance at a future. That night he took Megan to dinner again, not at the fancy restaurant this time, but at a simple place she had mentioned she liked, a pizzeria in Queens, near her apartment. Megan was touched by the gesture. "You don't have to impress me all the time, you know," she said as they ate. "I like you just the way you are." "I know, but I want to get to know you better. I want to know your world too, not just show you mine." They talked about everything. Megan spoke about her family, about how she missed home sometimes, hearing her mother's voice, her father's hug. Raphael talked about the pressure of inheriting an empire too young, about how he lost his teenage years to boardrooms and balance sheets. "Do you regret it?" Megan asked, "taking over everything so early?" "Sometimes, but I also know I had no choice. My father trusted me. I couldn't let him down." "You never let anyone down, Raphael. Only yourself." The observation was too profound for that light evening. Raphael fell silent, processing. Megan had this gift of seeing through him in a way no one else could. When he took her home, he kissed her at the door of the building, a long, deep kiss that said more than words ever could. When they parted, they were both breathless. "Megan," he said, holding her face, "I need to tell you something. I'm falling in love with you, deeply. And it scares me because I don't know if I'm good enough for you, but I want to try. I want to be better, for you, for us." Megan felt her heart burst with emotion. "You don't need to be better. You just need to be you. And I'm falling in love with you too. Maybe I'm already completely in love." They kissed again, and this time there was a promise in the kiss. A promise that they were in this together, no matter what came. But what they didn't know was that Jessica hadn't given up. The formal warning had only fueled her anger. She had lost the public battle, but she was not willing to lose the war, and she had a final plan. A plan that, if it worked, would destroy not only Raphael and Megan's relationship, but also the reputations of both. She had gained access to Raphael's internal emails through a contact in the IT department. It was technically illegal, but she was beyond caring about legalities. And what she found was gold. Emails exchanged between Raphael and Megan during work hours. Nothing explicitly sexual, but affectionate enough to raise questions. If contextualized in the right way, they could look like evidence of an inappropriate relationship starting while Megan was still a regular employee before her promotion. Jessica compiled the emails into a dossier and sent it anonymously to a journalist from a business news website known for publishing corporate scandals. In the anonymous email, she alleged nepotism and sexual favoritism at a major New York company. The journalist, always on the lookout for a good story, began to investigate. He contacted the company for comment, and that's how Raphael knew the storm was far from over. The news arrived on a Wednesday morning. Raphael received a call from the communications department warning him that a journalist was asking compromising questions. He immediately called a crisis meeting with the lawyers and the public relations team. Megan only found out hours later when Raphael called her to his office. She immediately noticed something was wrong. He looked tense, tired. "What happened?" she asked. "Someone leaked our emails, the personal ones, to the press. They're preparing a story about us." Megan felt the ground give way beneath her feet. "How? Who would do that?" "I have a pretty good idea who it was, but that doesn't matter now. What matters is how we handle this." "What did the lawyers say?" "That we have two options. We can deny everything, say the emails were taken out of context, that we're just professional colleagues, or we can publicly acknowledge the relationship and deal with the consequences." Megan sat down, her legs feeling wobbly. "And which one do you think we should do?" Raphael walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "It depends on you. If we deny it, your reputation is more protected. You won't be seen as the woman who got involved with her boss, but it means we'll have to hide our relationship indefinitely, maybe even publicly break up. And if we acknowledge it, then you will face judgment. People will say horrible things, your life will become news, but we will be honest, and we can live openly." Megan was silent, thinking. It was an impossible choice. Protect herself or protect the relationship, security or truth. Finally, she stood up and went to Raphael. She looked him in the eyes and said, "I choose you, I choose us, I choose the truth. It doesn't matter what people say." Raphael pulled her into a tight hug. "Are you sure? Because there's no going back after we do this. I'm sure I'm tired of hiding, tired of being ashamed of something that is good and true." "Then let's do it. Together." They prepared an official statement. They confirmed they were in a relationship, that it had begun after Megan's promotion, and that it did not violate any company policy since Raphael was no longer her direct superior after she was transferred to special projects. They clarified that the external review had confirmed the merit of the promotion, and they asked for privacy. The statement was released before the news article came out, taking away the element of scandal. Still, it made headlines. Millionaire CEO and young employee. The story practically sold itself. Megan woke up the next day to dozens of messages. Journalists wanting interviews, curious friends. Even her mother, worried, called from upstate asking if everything was okay. "Everything's fine, Mom," Megan assured her. "I'm fine, happy even." "And this man, is he good to you?" "He is, Mom, he's very good to me." "Then that's what matters, the rest is just noise." Her mother's simple words comforted her. She was right. The rest was just noise. In the following days there were comments online, some positive, others not so much, but most people eventually lost interest. There were bigger scandals, more interesting dramas, and at the office, after the initial shock, things began to normalize. Yes, there were stares. Yes, there were comments. But Megan had her allies now. Lucas, Camilla, and others who respected her work. Jessica, realizing her plan had failed, finally gave up. She requested a transfer to another company branch in a different city. Raphael promptly approved it. It was better for everyone. Deborah and Patricia, without their leader, lost interest in persecuting Megan. Eventually, they began to treat her with professional respect, if not friendship. Sometimes they would greet Megan in the hallways with sincerity. And Megan, for the first time since arriving in New York, felt like she belonged. Not just to the office, but to her own life. She had a job she loved, friends who supported her, and a man who made her feel valued. Raphael was also changed. More present, more open, more willing to show vulnerability. His relationship with Megan was making him a better version of himself. And he knew it. He was grateful for it every day. Chapter 9. 3 months had passed since Raphael and Megan publicly acknowledged their relationship, and in those 3 months, everything seemed to have finally fallen into place. Megan was leading a financial restructuring project that could save the company millions. Raphael was happier than he had been in years, and together, they were building something solid. But on a Friday afternoon, something unexpected happened that would test everything they had built. Megan was in her office reviewing contracts when she received a call from an unknown number. Normally, she wouldn't answer, but something made her pick up this time. "Hello? Ms. Stevens, this is St. Helena's Clinic. We have a patient here, Caroline Morgan, who asked us to call this number." Megan's world stopped. Caroline, the name of the woman Raphael had loved, the woman who had died, or at least he thought she had. "There must be some mistake," Megan said, her voice trembling. "The person you're looking for, she passed away many years ago." "No, ma'am. Ms. Morgan is very much alive. She was in a severe car accident 10 years ago and was in a coma. She woke up 6 months ago and has been undergoing rehabilitation with us. She asked us to find Raphael Miller, but we couldn't locate him directly. We found your name in some recent articles related to him and thought you might be able to help." Megan sat down, feeling dizzy. Was this real? Caroline was alive? How was that possible? And why was the clinic calling her? I'll talk to Raphael. Thank you very much for calling." When she hung up, Megan was paralyzed. How was she going to tell Raphael this, that the woman he had loved, mourned, and spent 10 years thinking was dead, was alive? And what did this mean for them? She needed time to process, but she didn't have any. Raphael had to know. Immediately. She stood up and walked to his office on shaky legs. Raphael was on the phone, but when he saw Megan's expression, he hung up immediately. "What happened? You're pale." Megan closed the door and sat down. "Raphael, I just got a call from St. Helena's clinic. It's about Caroline." Raphael's face turned white. "Caroline? Why would a clinic be calling about her?" "Because she's not dead, Raphael. She's alive. She was in a coma for 10 years and woke up 6 months ago." Raphael stood completely still. When he spoke, his voice was unrecognizable. "That's not possible. I was at the funeral. I saw—" "You saw what, Raphael? Did you see her body?" He fell silent, and Megan saw the answer in his eyes. No. He hadn't. The casket had been closed. They had said it was for the best, that the accident had been too severe, and he, too devastated to question, had believed them. "How is this possible?" he murmured. "How could her family lie to me?" Megan had no answers. She only had her own questions, questions that terrified her. "Raphael, what does this mean for us?" He looked at her as if he had forgotten she was there. "I don't know. I need to see her. I need to understand what happened. I'll go with you." "No, I need to do this alone." The words cut Megan like a knife, but she understood, or she tried to. This was bigger than her, bigger than them. "All right. But Raphael, promise me one thing. Promise me you'll come back, that we'll talk about this." He took her hand. "I promise." But as he walked out of that room, Megan wasn't sure she believed his promise. Raphael drove to St. Helena's clinic in a state of shock. His mind was in a whirlwind. Caroline was alive. How? Why? And why had her family lied to him? When he arrived at the clinic, he was met by a doctor who explained the situation. Caroline had suffered a severe traumatic brain injury in the accident. The doctors had told the family that the chances of her waking up were minimal. The family, not wanting Raphael to be tied to an impossible hope, decided to tell him she had passed away. They had even held a symbolic funeral. It was a cruel lie, but they thought they were doing what was best. "And now she's asking for me?" Raphael asked. "Yes. You were one of the first things she mentioned when she woke up. She doesn't yet know that you believed she was dead all these years." Raphael asked for a few minutes before seeing her. He sat in a waiting room, trying to sort through the whirlwind of emotions. Anger at the lie, shock that she was alive, guilt for having moved on, and fear. Fear of what he would feel when he saw her. When he finally entered the room, Caroline was sitting in a chair by the window. She had changed. Her hair was shorter. She had visible scars on her face and arms. But it was her. Unmistakably her. When she saw him, her eyes filled with tears. "Raphael." He couldn't speak. He just approached, knelt before her, and held her hands. And he cried. He cried for everything he had lost. For all the stolen years, for all the pain. They talked for hours. She told him about waking up not knowing where she was, not understanding what had happened, about discovering she had lost 10 years of her life, about how the first thing she wanted was to see him, and he told her about how he had believed she was dead, about how he had closed himself off from the world, and eventually about Megan. Caroline listened in silence. When he finished, she said, "You fell in love with her." It wasn't a question. "Yes," he admitted, "I did." "And she with you?" "Yes." "Then you need to go back to her. You can't let my past destroy your future." "But what about you? I spent 10 years thinking you were dead, and now you're here, alive. How do I just move on?" Caroline gave a sad smile. "Raphael, we were kids when we were together. I was 26, you were 28. We had dreams, but we also had problems. Do you remember the fights? The times I complained that you prioritized work? We were in love, but I don't know if we would have been happy forever." "You don't know that." "No, I don't, but I know that I know. Years have passed. You've changed. I've changed. And there's a woman out there who loves you now, not 10 years ago. It wouldn't be fair to any of us to try to rebuild something that maybe was never as solid as we remember." Raphael was silent, absorbing her words. Part of him knew she was right, but another part, the part that had carried the guilt and pain for so long, didn't want to let go. "I'm so sorry," he said finally, "for everything, for not fighting harder, for believing so easily, for moving on. Don't be, you lived. That's all I could have ever wanted. Now go back to her, and be happy for both of us." When Raphael left the clinic, it was already night. He drove aimlessly for a while, processing everything. Finally, he picked up the phone and called Megan. She answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" she asked. "I was worried. Driving. Can I see you?" "I'm home. Come over." When Raphael arrived at her apartment, Megan was waiting at the door. She had been crying. He could tell by her swollen eyes. But she was trying to maintain her composure. "How is she?" Megan asked. "Alive. Different, but alive." "And what did she say?" Raphael told her everything. About the conversation, about what Caroline had said, about the family's decision. And Megan listened to it all without interrupting. When he finished, she asked the only thing that mattered. "What do you feel now?" Raphael looked at her. This brave woman who had walked into his life and changed everything. "I feel like I've spent 10 years living in the past, and that now finally I have a chance to live in the present, with you if you'll still have me." Megan felt tears stream down her face. "Of course I will. But Raphael, I need to know, are you sure? Because if part of you is still with her, if you have doubts, I'd rather know now." "I have no doubts. Caroline is part of my past, a past that I will always carry. But you, Megan, you are my present, and if you'll let me, my future." She pulled him into a hug. They stood there, at the door of the apartment, just holding each other, and in that moment they both knew they had passed the final test. Nothing else could shake what they had, but there was one last surprise waiting. The next day, Raphael received a call from Caroline's family. They wanted to meet with him, to apologize in person. And there was something else they needed to tell him. Raphael agreed to meet them, but this time he brought Megan. She deserved to be by his side through everything. When they arrived at Caroline's family home, they were greeted by her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Morgan. They looked older, tired, burdened with guilt. "We are so sorry," Mr. Morgan said. "What we did was unforgivable. But we thought it was for the best. The doctors said she would never wake up. We didn't want you to waste your life waiting." "And now?" Raphael asked. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Mrs. Morgan said. "We just wanted you to know the whole truth. Caroline doesn't want to reopen her relationship with you. She's starting a new life, focusing on her rehabilitation. And she asked us to pass on a message." She handed Raphael an envelope. Inside was a letter, written in Caroline's shaky handwriting. Raphael read it silently with Megan by his side. The letter said, "Raphael, thank you for loving me. Thank you for keeping my memory with such care. But now it's time to let go. We are different people than we were, and you found someone who makes you happy as you are today. Don't waste that out of loyalty to a ghost. Be happy. It's all I ever wanted for you." When he finished reading, Raphael carefully folded the letter and put it away. He looked at Megan, who had tears in her eyes, and he knew that finally, after 10 years, he was free. Free from the past. Free from guilt. Free to love completely. Chapter 10. 6 months after the reunion with Caroline, Megan and Raphael's life had found a new equilibrium. The episode, as painful as it had been, had actually strengthened their relationship. They had faced the past together and emerged more united than ever. It was as if that final trial had cemented something between them, something unbreakable. Megan was now a special projects manager, a position earned purely on merit. Her financial restructuring work had saved the company $15 million in the first year. The numbers were undeniable, the results irrefutable. Raphael no longer had any doubts that she belonged in that position, and neither did anyone else in the company. Even the most skeptical had to admit that Megan Stevens was extraordinarily competent. She had developed a new confidence. It wasn't arrogance, but a quiet certainty of her own worth. She spoke up in meetings without fear. She defended her ideas with firmness. And people listened. They respected her. The transformation was visible to everyone who had known her from the beginning. On a sunny Saturday morning, Raphael woke up before Megan. They had spent the night at his penthouse, something that had become a routine in recent months. He watched her sleep, her brown hair spread across the white pillow, her expression serene, her lips slightly parted. Her left hand rested near her face, and Raphael imagined what it would look like with a ring there. And he knew it was time. It was more than time. He got up carefully so as not to wake her and went to the safe hidden in the closet. He entered the combination with fingers that trembled slightly with anticipation. From it, he retrieved a small dark blue velvet box that had been stored there for weeks. He opened it slowly, admiring the diamond ring that had belonged to his paternal grandmother. It was an old classic piece, with a central diamond surrounded by small sapphires. He had gone to get it from upstate New York weeks ago. On a weekend, Megan thought he was in business meetings. It had been difficult to lie to her, but the surprise was worth it. When he returned to the room, she was waking up. Her eyes still sleepy, she smiled when she saw him. "Good morning," she murmured, stretching like a cat. "Good morning, my love. Did you sleep well?" "Very well. I always sleep well when I'm here with you. What time is it?" "Almost 9. I have a surprise for you today." Megan sat up in bed, curious, pulling the sheet up to cover herself. "What kind of surprise? You know I'm not a big fan of surprises." "You'll like this one, I promise. Wear something comfortable. We're going out." "Where to?" "If I tell you, it's not a surprise anymore," he said with a mischievous smile she rarely saw, but loved. An hour later, they were driving out of the city. The Saturday traffic was lighter, and soon they left the grey of New York behind, heading toward the mountains. Megan tried to guess where they were going, asking questions that Raphael skillfully deflected. When the road finally began to climb into the mountains, she started to suspect, and when they arrived she recognized the place immediately. It was the house in the Catskills, the place where they had shared their first kiss, where it had all truly begun, where she had allowed herself to trust him for the first time. "What are we doing here?" she asked, but she already felt butterflies in her stomach. Her heart was beating faster. "You'll see, come on." They entered the house. It was completely different. Scented candles were lit everywhere, creating a soft, golden light. Red rose petals were scattered on the wooden floor, forming a path that led to the main living room. Instrumental music played softly, a melody Megan recognized as the one they had danced to on a special night. She brought a hand to her chest, feeling her eyes well up with tears. "Raphael, what is all this? When did you have time to prepare it?" He took her hands, lacing their fingers together. "I had help, but that doesn't matter. What matters is what I want to tell you. Megan Stevens, from the day I saw you in that cafeteria, screaming desperately, asking to be seen, something inside me woke up. I saw a brave woman disguised as a shy one. I saw authenticity in a world of falsehoods. I saw truth where others only saw fragility. And I fell in love." Tears were already streaming down her face, but they were good tears, happy ones. "You taught me that I can still feel, that I can still love, that I can still be vulnerable without breaking. You gave me not just a present, but a future I had given up on believing existed, and I want to spend that future by your side. I want to wake up every day seeing your face. I want to grow old with you. I want to build a family, a life, everything." He then knelt, taking the small box from his pocket. The candlelight reflected off the blue velvet. Megan brought her hands to her mouth, trembling. "Megan Stevens, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my best friend for the rest of our lives?" She didn't even have to think. The answer had been in her heart all along. "Yes, yes, yes, 1,000 times yes, I will, Raphael." Raphael slid the ring onto her finger, with hands that shook with emotion. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. He stood up and pulled her into a kiss that held all the promises in the world, a kiss that sealed a commitment, a kiss that wordlessly said everything they felt. When they parted, they were both laughing and crying at the same time in a chaotic and beautiful mix of emotions. "It's your grandmother's, isn't it?" Megan asked, looking at the ring through her tears. "I saw it in the old photos." "It is. She left it for me with a letter saying I should give it to the woman who made my heart start beating again. And you did that, Megan. You made my heart start beating again." "There's more," he then said, with a mysterious smile. "More? How can there be more? This is already too perfect." He guided her to the terrace at the back of the house, and there Megan saw them for the first time, and her heart almost stopped. Her parents. Mr. Joseph and Mrs. Mary, standing on the terrace with huge smiles, had come from upstate New York to be there for this sacred moment. Her mother was crying copiously with emotion. Her father had a proud smile on his wrinkled face. "Mom! Dad!" Megan ran to them, hugging them tightly, as if she were a child again. "How are you here? I didn't know. When did you arrive?" "Raphael came to get us last week," her mother explained, stroking her daughter's face. "He said he had a very important question to ask. He asked for our blessing to marry you, and he asked us to be here for this moment." "And how could we say no?" her father added, in that deep voice Megan loved. "Seeing how this young man looks at you, how he loves you, how he respects you, he reminded me of how I looked at your mother when we were young." Megan's father then approached Raphael and extended his hand. But instead of a handshake, he pulled him into a tight hug. "Take good care of my girl. She's the most precious thing we have." "With my life, Mr. Joseph, I promise I will honor that trust every day." They spent the day there, the four of them, talking on the porch, laughing at old stories, planning the future. Megan's parents told stories from her childhood that embarrassed her in an adorable way. How she had been shy since she was a little girl, always hiding behind her mother's legs. How she had cried on her first day of school. How it had taken her years to make friends. But also how she had been studious, dedicated, and responsible from an early age. Raphael talked about his plans for the future, not just professional ones, but mainly personal ones. He wanted to build a family. He wanted to have children who could play in that house in the Catskills. He wanted to teach them the values his father had taught him. He wanted to give them the love he sometimes felt he had missed out on by growing up too fast. He wanted everything he had, thought he would never have, all the simple things that money couldn't buy. Mrs. Mary prepared lunch, insisting she would cook even though she was on vacation. She made the home-style dishes Megan loved and missed. Pot roast, collard greens, pork ribs, fluffy rice. The aroma filled the house and brought back happy childhood memories. During the meal, Raphael asked about Megan's hometown, showing genuine interest. He wanted to know the place where she had grown up, where she had been formed, where she had first dreamed of a life in New York. When Megan's parents retired to the guest room after dinner, tired from the trip and the emotional day, she and Raphael were left alone on the terrace watching the stars that shone intensely without the city's light pollution. "I still can't believe this is happening," Megan said, looking at the ring that sparkled on her finger in the moonlight. "A year ago, I was invisible. I was ridiculed. I thought I would never be truly seen, that I would never be loved this way. And now? Now I feel seen, valued, loved in a way I didn't even know was possible. You gave me that, Raphael. You gave me not only love, but also confidence. You taught me to value myself." "No," he corrected gently, pulling her closer. "You were always worthy of being seen. You always had that value. I was just lucky enough to be paying attention when you finally decided to show yourself, when you had the courage to shout, to demand to be recognized." They stayed there for hours, talking about the wedding, what it would be like, where it would be, who they would invite. Megan wanted something intimate, special. Raphael agreed. They didn't need hundreds of people. They just needed the people who truly mattered. They were married 3 months later in an intimate and emotional ceremony at the same house in the Catskills. The garden was decorated with wildflowers and delicate lights strung through the trees. Only close family and true friends were invited. Lucas Morgan was the best man, proud to be standing next to the man he had learned to respect. Camilla was the maid of honor, radiant to see her friend so happy. Even Lucy was there, crying copiously during the ceremony, as if she were the groom's mother, moved to see the man she had cared for so many years finally find happiness. Meghan walked down the aisle to the sound of a violin, guided by her teary-eyed father. Her dress was simple but elegant, made of white lace with a modest train. When Raphael saw her, he had to fight to contain his emotion. She was absolutely beautiful. The vows were personal, written by themselves. Meghan promised to be his partner in everything, through good days and bad. She promised to keep challenging him to be better, to feel more, to live fully. Raphael promised to honor her trust, protect her heart, and love her with the same intensity for the rest of their lives. News of the wedding reached the office the following Monday, and to Meghan's surprise, the reaction was overwhelmingly positive. People had seen how hard she worked, how she had proven her worth repeatedly over the months, and they also saw how Raphael had changed. He was more present in meetings, more human in his interactions, happier in a way that radiated. Jessica, still working at the Chicago branch, heard the news through colleagues and felt a pang of something that wasn't quite envy. It was more like deep regret. Regret for having wasted so much time and energy trying to destroy something that was genuine and good. She never formally apologized, but she also never caused any more trouble. Eventually, she found her own path and learned from her mistakes. Deborah and Patricia, who had remained at the company, eventually learned to respect Meghan. They never became close friends, but the hostility gave way to a civil and even cordial professional coexistence. Sometimes they would greet Meghan in the hallways with sincerity. And Caroline? She continued her rehabilitation with determination and courage. A year after waking up, she was living completely independently in an adapted apartment in New York. She occasionally exchanged messages with Raphael, friendly updates about their lives, with no bitterness or resentment. She had started dating Peter, a dedicated physical therapist from the clinic who had helped her in her recovery. And when she learned of Raphael and Meghan's wedding, she sent a beautiful bouquet of white flowers with a card that simply said, "Be happy. You deserve all the love in the world." 2 years after the wedding, in the early hours of a March morning, Meghan gave birth to a healthy baby girl weighing 7.5 pounds. It was a long but uncomplicated labor. When the nurse placed the baby in Raphael's arms for the first time, he cried without shame. They named her Caroline Mary, a tribute to the past that had allowed for the future, and to the grandmother who had welcomed her with such love. "Are you okay?" Meghan asked from the bed, exhausted but radiant. "I'm perfect. She's perfect. You're perfect. All of this is more than I ever deserved." As Raphael held his daughter, looking into those little eyes that could barely open, he cried again. He cried for everything he had lost over the years, but especially for everything he had gained, for this second chance, for this family, for this love. Meghan, watching her husband with their newborn daughter, felt a deep peace fill every empty space that had once existed in her heart. She had come a long way from that shy 26-year-old who hid her light for fear of judgment. She had learned that vulnerability was not weakness, but the greatest of strengths, that shouting when necessary was not losing control, but finding the voice that had always been there, that true love doesn't judge the past, but builds the future brick by brick. And Raphael had learned that closing his heart to protect himself from pain also closed it to joy and to life, that living eternally in the past was to waste the precious present, and that sometimes the best and most transformative things in life come disguised as desperate moments in a crowded cafeteria. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, 3 years after Caroline's birth, they were back at the house in the Catskills. The little girl, now a bundle of 5-year-old energy, played in the garden chasing butterflies with crystalline laughter. Raphael watched Meghan run after their daughter, both laughing without a care, and felt a gratitude so deep and overwhelming that it ached in his chest in a good way. "Are you okay?" Meghan asked when she came to sit beside him on the wooden bench, Caroline finally asleep in her lap after so much play. "I'm perfect. Completely perfect. I was just thinking about how that desperate scream in a cafeteria changed absolutely everything in my life." Meghan laughed, the melodious sound echoing through the garden. It wasn't exactly my most elegant moment, I admit. It was your truest moment, your bravest. Most you. And it was exactly what made me see you. Really see you for who you are. She rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the comforting warmth. Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that I have you, our beautiful daughter, this wonderful life. It feels like a dream. Believe it, it's real. And know that every day I thank heaven that you had the courage to shout, to show yourself, to trust me when you had no reason to. And I thank you for paying attention when no one else was, for seeing beyond the surface, for loving me not in spite of who I am, but exactly for who I am, with all my insecurities and fears. They sat there, the three of them, as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in orange and pink. A family built on truth, on courage, on a love that overcomes all obstacles. A family that proved that sometimes, and perhaps always, the most beautiful and unexpected endings come from the most unlikely and painful beginnings. And in that house in the Catskills, where it had all timidly begun, where promises had been made and religiously kept, where a first kiss had sealed a destiny, Megan and Raphael knew with absolute certainty that they had found something extraordinarily rare in this world. They had found each other against all odds, and in the process of finding each other, they had also found themselves, their best versions. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Megan and Raphael has touched your hearts in the same way it touched ours while creating it. This is a story about courage, about finding your voice when everyone tries to silence it, about the love that heals and transforms. To continue this emotional journey with us, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. You can find it by clicking here on the side. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day we bring unique narratives that explore the complexity of life, love, and human relationships. We want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to find your voice? Have you ever felt invisible until someone truly saw you? Share your story in the comments. Your experiences enrich our community and can inspire others. Don't miss our upcoming content. Until the next story,